From Boston, Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett. You know, we've been away from this garden for 2 weeks. It was just last week that we revitalized an old perennial border, and the week before that we put in a new lawn. Well, there's been a lot happening in 2 weeks here in the garden, and I'm going to, for example, today we're going to dig a few potatoes, going to harvest some more corn. I have some tips on saving parsley and how to pick melons and how to know when they're ripe. And if there's time, we're going to sort out and size out some of the tulip bulbs that used to grow alongside the greenhouse here last spring. But first of all, I want to introduce you to the fleece vine in full blossom. Now, this is the vine which was about 15 inches tall when I planted it last April. It's up over the top of the greenhouse and coming into blossom with these soft white blossoms which give rise to the name fleece vine. Very, very hardy plant, usually dies back to the ground. I like to cut it to the ground each year and make this fresh new growth. Now, some people have written in asking how to propagate them. Well, we tried propagating them a short time ago without much luck, so I called a friend at the Arnold Arboretum, Al Fordham, who is a professional plant propagator, and he said what you have to look for is wood which is similar to this, which will snap when you bend it over. This wood is mature enough to root, but this isn't the time of the year to do it. It has to be done in June. Presumably, it's something to do with the fact that the mature wood at that time of year has more stored nutrients in it. Well, now let's go and we'll talk about some vegetables for a minute. One of the questions we've had is, how do you tell when squash is ripe? Well, the way that I tell is according to the color of the foliage, now, of the skin of the squash. Now, you perhaps can't tell on camera, but this one is quite orange and quite shiny, whereas this one over in here is a dull orange. And when they're dull, they're ready to pick. And you notice how I cut it? With a pair of shears. Because if you break off this stem right down here at the fruit, it simply won't keep. And this one is ready for storing, and you can keep it when late in the fall. This is a little one called Gold Nugget. Just about one person-size serving. These are great to pop right into the oven as they are, and then clean them out after they're ripe. Now, I want to talk to you about storing squashes and pumpkins. The secret is this. They like to be relatively warm and dry, about 50 to 55 degrees, rather than cold as you might have for apples or pears. Be sure that you don't break the stem off. That's the thing. They'll keep for many, many months. I would keep mine out in the garage, for example, right up until the time the heavy frosts come, and then move them into a protected spot. Well, there's a squash, and we have some pumpkins in here, a variety called Cinderella. Again, you notice that this fruit is perfectly orange, so this one is ready for harvest and will keep a long, long time. Again, we cut the stem off and lift this fellow up like this. Now, this is not a large pumpkin, but it's a pretty nice size for Halloween jack-o'-lanterns. Makes good pie pumpkin, and it doesn't run all over the garden. A variety called Cinderella. Now, we'll put Cinderella down here a minute, because I noticed another one over here this morning that's not ripe. And it's important to know what isn't ready to pick sometimes as those which are ready. Now, if you can see down into this one, the dark green stripes just beginning to show color. So this one is not ready for harvest. We'll let it get orange before it's harvested. But down in here we have a squash which is ready. Now, this one is called the Waltham butternut. Beige in color, dull in aspect. When you look at it now, means that it is ready to harvest. This, by the way, Waltham butternut is one marvelous squash. It does run 20 feet in each direction, so we plant it here on the edges of our garden so that it can run on into the grass. But it's resistant to that vine borer, and that's the thing which I like about it. Now let's look at some peas. About the middle of August, I planted some peas in here because they do well in cold weather. A variety here known as Wando. This is the regular pea. Get up here about 30 inches tall. We have some brush for it to grow on. Notice that I planted them thickly. The color is nice and rich. Next to it, we have a row of peas. This is the edible potted pea, the Oregon sugar pea. Deep, rich color. Wonderful growing conditions for peas in the fall because the days are getting cooler and cooler. If you know anything about growing peas, they like cool weather. Well, it's time that we dug some more potatoes. First of all, let's look at, or review with you, what you look for when you're ready to dig potatoes. This is what the vine should look like, all dried out like that. That means that the tubers beneath the ground are perfectly mature. I've had people say, oh, my potato vines are all turning brown. What have I done wrong? Well, not a thing, because they're just ready to harvest. Now, I don't know what we're going to get here in the way of harvest, but I do want to remind you, just as a self-protection, it was right down in here, along in midsummer, we dug underneath the vines and pulled out a bunch of new potatoes. Now, you can use many kinds of tools for digging, but a spading fork, I guess, is as good as any. There's some big ones in there, all sizes. Oh. I guess I've never dug potatoes without sticking a fork into them somewhere along the line. But I'm not simply going to dig potatoes in here. I'm going to get these out, and then we're going to plant another crop. This is red Pontiac, by the way. Is this one you see it has a little reddish color to it. Still coming out. That's pretty good yield for one hill from which we've already sneaked out quite a few potatoes. These were grown in the traditional method of culture. That is, we planted these in a trench about 4 or 5 inches deep. Yes, nice potatoes here. Now, these potatoes should lie in the sun for about 2 hours or so until they get dry, and then you want to store them in the darkness. I don't think I'm going to dig any more right there for the moment. What I want to do is to show you what I am going to do with the whole rest of this row. I just don't want to leave a part of this garden without something growing in it. So right now, where the potatoes came out, I'm going to drop in a little compost, just like that, and some 10-10-10 fertilizer. This is the one which is high in nitrogen. Sprinkle just a little bit of this on the top. Keep saying, you know, you can't keep drawing stuff out of the bank unless you put something in. So we'll put a little bit more nutrients into this soil, and still finding potatoes, I see. Level this off, and we're going to put in some lettuce seedlings. Matter of fact, we can put in, this one is slow bolt. This is one that does well in hot weather, but will do well in cool weather as well. Put them in like that. And we can run a double row through here. Now, I believe very firmly in having some seedlings ready all the time so that you can, whenever there's a place in the garden that comes available, you can get right to it and put in a crop such as this. We have some corn. Now, this is our 6th planting of corn this year, the 6th variety that we've harvested. Not terribly tall, but we do have a harvest in here somewhere. This is a variety called Butter and Sugar. Not terribly long ears and such, but we'll see what they look like at this time of year. Not bad. This is Butter and Sugar, ready to eat, just as sweet and delicious as can be. I'll tell you what we did in this garden and what I would advise you doing if you have sufficient room. We planted along here 5 different varieties of corn. They matured early, mid-season, and late. And then we took that first variety. After the first one had matured, we hauled the soil out, these out and put in seedlings and started another crop of corn in the very same piece of garden. Ordinarily, however, I would say that after the first planting, about every 2 weeks until the middle of the summer, put in a planting of a mid-season or a late variety, and you can have corn right up until the coldest weather, right up until hard frosts. Well, let's go over now and we'll talk about melons, because I've got many a question on growing melons, and the one we're growing here is a cantaloupe melon. This variety happens to be known as ambrosia, and you can see what it's looking like here. Now this melon, growing on a fence so that it won't utilize a lot of garden space, and because it's heavy, I've put a little netting around it so that this is a kind of a sling to keep it from tearing itself off the vine should we get a hard thunderstorm. Now this is not ready for picking. It's green here. Down at the base, you can see the netting beginning to show. Now this is an indication that the ripening process is progressing. But the way to tell when a melon is ripe is right up here at the very top. There's a disc that you may be able to see about a ½ inch in diameter. When you can push on it with your thumb and it slips free of the melon, then you know that that melon is ripe and ready for harvest, and it'll be just as sweet as honey. Many, many good varieties of cantaloupes. That one is called ambrosia. We really do like it. Now, looking forward to the winter time, we like some vegetables indoors. I thought we might start by digging up a parsley plant. Now, this is something which you can put on your windowsill and will provide green leaves all winter long. Parsley such as this, just put it in a flower pot, like so. Put some more soil in around that. And I want you to know that you can harvest this right straight through the winter. No, don't be the least bit concerned if some of the lower leaves turn yellow, because it's normal, as you see, even in the garden. But you will, if you keep harvesting the older leaves, you'll get more and more of the fresh ones coming from the center of the crown. Now, last spring, did kind of a foolish thing, I guess. I planted a few raspberries in this border just to show you what raspberries look like, the ever-bearing type. It's not a good place because they're crowded among the perennials. But I did want to show you this variety. This is the one called Durham, so-called ever-bearing raspberry. Not really ever-bearing. It bears in June and again in September and right up until frost. Nice time of the year to have raspberries. And very sweet. Well, the border, as you see, still has color on it. These phlox, we pruned off the old blossoms and got another crop. And down in here come the first of the fall asters, a variety called Eventide. I guess you can see we're right beside the parking lot here at the studio. Someone just started up their car. This eventually will be covered with flowers, a deep purple aster, hardy as a rock, because these come from the native wild asters which are found in various parts of the United States and Canada. Next to it, we have some phlox still going. This is a variety called American Legion. And then down to this peace rose. I want you to see how lovely the rose is at this time of year. So days begin to get a little bit cool. Now, the foliage is clean. You don't see any bug holes or any disease on this foliage because we spray it once a week with a proprietary rose spray that contains a fungicide and insecticides. You can get this rose spray at any garden center. There's no reason that you can't grow roses such as this in your own garden. See the new buds coming along to follow the blossom, which is now there. Well, we go from there, we'll talk about some spinach, because our fall crop of spinach is beginning to take shape now. You see, these plants are roughly 3 inches apart in the row. I'm going to cultivate in around those today, loosening the soil, getting out the weeds. In about a week's time, I'm going to come along here and pull every other plant, because they're now at about 3 inches apart. Well, I can pull that one, and this one, and this one, and so that we'll have a 6-inch spacing. In a week's time, these plants are going to be big enough to go right into the pot or into a salad, and then the plants on 6-inch spacing will become very large before we're harvesting them. But to give them a push right now, I have here a little liquid fertilizer. This happens to be Rapid Grow, but many other kinds can be used. Put the liquid fertilizer right on top of this foliage. What doesn't hit the foliage and it absorbed that way will go down, will hit the roots. And so we can't lose in this kind of fertilization. We know that those will be off and growing very fast. Next to it, we have a row of celery. And you might look first of all down at the base of the plant, and you can see the size of these stalks coming in here. Now, this celery is certainly large enough to pick, and of course, if you have enough celery in your garden, you can pick it at any stage because the flavor is there at any stage. But these stalks, grown in rather dry soil, are apt to be a little bit tough. Well, I can take the toughness out of them by taking some of the green out of the stems. Now, I have a board I've already put on the other side of the row. I'm going to put a board up like this, which is going to help exclude the light. We'll just crowd that up rather tightly and drive some stakes in beside it here. Now that, in about 2 weeks or so, that will be, most of those lower stems will have lost their color. They'll be creamy white, just as tender as can be. Notice I didn't do the whole row, because in the home garden, you can use only about so much celery at one time. You don't want a 20-foot row all ready to pick at one sitting. Here we have a little space in the garden where I'm going to put in some radishes. And this is the time of the year that you can sow radishes to come along for the winter. Beside this is a row of winter radishes, which will be those great big black or white, black-skinned or white-skinned roots. Very, very tender and not very hot. But right now I'm going to plant in some ordinary radishes. Must tell you about soil preparation, because if you've ever grown radishes, you know what happens when those root maggots get at them and tunnel holes in them. So I put diazinon powder in the soil, dug it up, added some 5-10-5 fertilizer. Now all I'm going to do now, this variety says Red Prince Improved. Well, that sounds like a good one. We'll just sow the seeds here in a rather wide pattern. Don't have to put these in a little narrow row at all. Matter of fact, if I had a row 3 feet wide and I wanted that many radishes, I could grow them that way. And we pull a little of this soil in from the side. We'll cover those over about a ½ inch deep. I'll finish the rest of this row with 2 or 3 other different kinds of radishes, and they'll be ready for picking in just about a month. We'll tap those down, give them a drink of water, and they'll sprout very, very fast. Well, some time ago, early this spring, you saw me plant a strawberry barrel. I thought it's about time I reported back to you to show you what this strawberry barrel looks like. You see some of the fruit hanging on here. This is an ever-bearing variety called Ozark. Rather nice. The berries, the plants themselves were set into holes, 2-inch holes, which I bored here in the side of the barrel. The soil is a mixture of compost and garden soil, plus some slow-release fertilizer. Nice crop of strawberries coming out over here. So far the birds have left us alone, getting a nice crop out of them. Well, we're going to go in the greenhouse very shortly, but I want to stop and dig up a plant in the garden, something which you can grow in the house all winter long. Now we think of plants such as this. Now this is the wax begonia. We think of this plant as being an annual only because we eventually get frost and they get killed. But this plant can very well go on year after year in the house and in the garden if we treat it properly. We'll put this one in a flower pot like this. And that's just about ready for a windowsill, as you can see, with plenty of color on it. But let's go in the greenhouse and I'll show you some other wax begonias we can do something else with. Now, I have some plants in here which have been growing along for some time in flower pots, and they are pretty straggly. As you can see, what we have in here, some old dead stalks, but down at the base, if you look way down in there, you'll find there are some fresh young ones coming. And so I'll just go in and remove those old stalks. And don't be afraid of sacrificing a few blossoms at this time, because it's not the blossoms that you're looking for right now, it's the growth of the plant for the coming winter. So we'll end up by pruning off all the old dead things, and then I'll show you one which we did the same thing to about a month ago. You can see the stubs of the old stems down in there, but it's sent out all of this new growth. And here you see blossoms coming here, blossoms here, more blossoms started down in there. Now a plant such as this is one which will go on and blossom all winter long. Its botanical name is Begonia simpliflorens, which means always flowering, and that's kind of a nice thing to have. A simple plant, an old-fashioned plant, but you know, it's hard to beat those that always blossom. It's pretty hard to beat them. Now, I said today that if we had time, we'd do something about tulips, and I think we have a minute. This is some tulips called Red Emperor. This is some that blossomed beside our greenhouse in the bed this spring. We took the bulbs out and matured the plants. I want you to see now what we have here for sizes. We get all different size bulbs from them. Now, I'm looking for bulbs about this size, which are big enough to blossom next year. There is a question whether this one might possibly do it, but these little fellows over here won't blossom. Now, what I'm afraid that some of you are going to do is to send off and get some of these bulb specials where you get X number of bulbs for a very ridiculous price, and you think, well, now that looks like a good buy. And let me convince you here, if I can, it's not a good buy. If you buy a dozen full-size bulbs, look for the name top size, then you'll be sure of getting a dozen blossoms. You can get 100 of these little scrawny ones like this, and you can't get one blossom from them. But what you do with these bulbs, which you save from your own each year, set those out in your garden 2 or 3 inches apart, let them grow another year, then they'll be this size. You can dig them and replant them in your flower garden. Otherwise, plant them in your vegetable garden for a while, for a season or two. That's how you grow tulips. Now, let's get to a few questions today, if we can. Here's one from Ozone Park, New York. On one of your shows, you grew a new rose bush from another one. Could you please tell me how this is done? Well, yes, I can not only tell you, but I can show you one of the little plants that we grew from a cutting. This was taken in June. This is a rose, by the way, called New Dawn. You see the roots coming here on the bottom of this? Now, this was rooted in perlite, and then when the roots formed, we transferred it into potting soil. Nice little plant. That's one which came from a plant which my uncle gave me some 25 years ago. He had grown his plant originally from a cutting that someone else gave him. It's one of the nice things about gardening is sharing some of the plants that you have. My main crop and early girl tomatoes grew fine, but they've been extremely slow to ripen. What happened? Cloudy weather can have something to do with it, but it probably is shade, or it could be too much fertilizer. You notice that we've done in our garden, we grow some tomatoes on stakes and some in cages. The cage ones are later to ripen. They have a larger amount of fruit, but those ones grown on stakes are great because they ripen very quickly. What precautions should be taken to avoid bringing bugs into the house with plants that have been out for the summer? Well, before you get ready to bring them indoors, mix up a spray or buy a spray containing a fungicide and an insecticide. Follow the directions, spray the plants well, especially underneath the foliage where the insects might be hiding. Then rinse, about 2 or 3 hours later, rinse the spray off the foliage and bring the plants in. Don't set them with your other plants. Segregate them. Quarantine them for time to see that there are no bugs being brought inside. Here's one. I've never seen an aphid, but this summer I seem to be making up for lost time. I've tried everything, nothing works. Any suggestions? Well, I remember in your letter that you said that you'd been using water and anything that's non-toxic. Well, what you may have to do is to shift to an insecticide such as malathion or diazinon or nicotine sulfate, something which will come and go quickly and take the aphids with it. I have a gardenia tree with scale. Can this be controlled? Yes, it can. Again, a good insecticide is malathion. It will kill the scales, but they will still be clinging to the stem. Now, the rest of you who don't know what a scale looks like a little turtle, miniature turtle, stuck to the side of the stem. After you've sprayed them, you may have to take a little knife tip and pry them off, throw them away, but they will be killed by the spray. Well, they say that's all the time we have for today. Next week, we're going to plant some fall vegetable crops in a cold frame to protect them way until late in the fall. We're going to take some cuttings of houseplants, and maybe we're going to have some paper white narcissus to plant for you. I'm Jim Crockett in Crockett's Victory Garden. I hope you enjoy the program every week.